What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Van Chats on the Out of Bounds Network. If I sound a little under the weather, it is because I have tested positive for COVID over the weekend. So fun stuff. But luckily, we get to do this stuff virtually. And I'm here with Rob Gitelis from Factor Bicycles, the CEO, the big dog, the guy that wears the big pants over there and does all the cool stuff. But yeah, you're in Taiwan right now. Is that
I
correct?
am.
Canadian
Yep.
in Taiwan?
No, I'm actually American from
You're
Miami.
American. Okay, you're from
Yeah.
Miami originally. So
Yeah.
so tell us your backstory. How do you find yourself an American from Miami, into cycling? And then Miami's a pretty popular cycling area, but how do you find yourself in Taiwan owning one of the biggest cycling companies to date?
Yeah. Well, I mean, going all the way back to Miami, I grew up in Miami at a time when cycling was popular there, but not so popular in the US.
Okay.
And I actually was very lucky that I got sort of brought under the wings of the Carmichael brothers. So Kevin and Chris Carmichael,
Oh,
who
I
are
work
all
for Chris.
right. And so
Oh,
they're also
okay.
up, I was a roommate a little bit later in life with his brother Kevin. And so, I was very lucky to get, cycling experience, firsthand from them. And so it enabled me to, progress as a bike racer. But then, fast forward, I came to Taiwan in 1996 to actually visit my girlfriend at the time. And one thing led to another, and I ended up racing the Tour of Taiwan, which led to me, being offered some job opportunities in the bicycle industry here when, bikes really hadn't quite taken off here in Taiwan yet. It was still kind of very entry level bikes,
Okay.
but you could tell that, a lot of companies were coming here and that more high end was on the way. And so these companies needed somebody who kind of, understood what a race bike was like, how it was used. And then, um, I got those sort of opportunities, very early. And so I just decided to stay. And then one thing led to another. And 26 years later, I'm still here.
Man, that is actually kind of crazy. And so, because you've purchased, because I did a little bit of research, you purchased Factor from John Bailey
Uh,
and
from B- from BF1 Systems, yes, it
BF1
was.
Systems.
Yeah.
Okay, and what's interesting is that I think it's the Factor 001 literally looks like a replica of Alex Dowsett's bike, or some of the bikes that are kind of going out and about currently. It's kind of cool. So how do you like? Why Factor? Like it sounded like you could have purchased any other bike company, but why Factor?
Well, maybe a little more background. So, I worked for a couple of companies, and then I started my own company in around 1999,
Okay.
and that company was doing contract manufacturing for different brands. So, I started to work with Cervelo from like pretty much the time that Cervelo was founded to the time that it was sold. I was in charge of all of their supply chain purchasing and development and,
Oh,
working with their engineers. So there was a time where I was building bikes for Cervelo, for Focus, for Santa Cruz, working with Zip, Envy, Bontrager, pretty much the who's who of the industry. And I was
yeah.
making quite a products for them. But around 5 or 6 years ago, I decided this wasn't so interesting anymore. My company was quite big. It was quite challenging to manage. And I was actually building bikes for Factor, their first bike that they tried to commercialize into more of a standard production bike. And so I got to know the people at BF1, including John Bailey, but the bike wasn't real. Bike was a commercial success, but they really didn't know how to sell it. And so
Yeah.
it kind of by the wayside. So then when I decided I wanted to have a brand, I thought, well, it's always easier to buy a brand that already has a little bit of recognition than to just come up with a name out of nowhere.
For
So,
sure.
kind of funny, I've been cycling for a long time. So I looked at, can I buy Rosine? Can I buy, there was a few brands. I looked at Rosine, I looked at Concord, I looked at Tomasini, but, I finally decided, well, Factor, it's a lot more in line with the engineering that I do. And so like, let me, speak to Factor, to the BF1 guys, and they were open to selling me the brand, and so that's how kind of came about.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's a cool name. It's one of those names where like you're just like, damn it, like how does nobody thought of that sooner? Like Factor and Canyon, like those two names, I'm just like, how have nobody thought of those names for bike brands sooner? It's like specialized, right? It's just like so spot on. Um,
Yeah.
but anyways, so diving, me with the COVID, obviously we're still in a pandemic. What has it been like for you, man? Like it's had to have been tough.
It's a real roller coaster ride. We own our own production, which is very different from a lot of other bicycle companies. We own the factory that makes our products.
Wow.
So I have a lot of mouths to feed. And when COVID first hit, it hit here in Asia, and we kind of saw it coming a few months before the rest of the world. And
Yeah.
I was kind of like staring at a cliff, thinking this is going to just, we're going off the edge of this cliff. But I didn't stop producing because I already have to pay all of those workers. I already had all that material. So I just kept going. And the rest of the industry, when they saw it coming a few months later, they all hit the brakes
Mhm.
and like started canceling orders and just totally stopping production. And the factories in China were shutting down and not coming back from Chinese New Year holiday because they had no orders. And everything kind of ground to a halt. And then all of a sudden, fast forward 3 or 4 months, and it just took off again. And nobody was ready for it. And we were in a really nice position that we never stopped. We had kept building. And we were able to sort of catch that demand when everybody else was like, I have no bikes to sell.
Yeah.
And so, it was very lucky for us. And at the same time, even during COVID, we've launched several new models when most bicycle companies, they're unable to travel here to Asia. And so for them to do any kind of launching new product is super difficult for them when, we're already here in Asia. It's our factory. So we've been able to launch quite a few new products in this time of COVID.
No, and that was my next topic was, how have you guys been able to do, what you guys have done as far as launching new products and new things like that. And I guess you literally answered that question for me. And so I guess, diving into kind of a little bit of my next topic, of new bikes and new brands, the one of the things where I started to latch on to you was when I saw Alex Dowsett come out for the hour record. And
Mhm.
it wasn't just like any other bike company giving like, hey, here's our time trial frame, make it somewhat track legal, good luck. Like
Mhm.
you guys put a lot of work into that. So where did that start? How long of a process was that? Because while other bike brands are sitting here panicking about getting 2022 models in, it just seems like you're in La La Land creating a completely off the shelf bike that is unlike any other.
Yeah, well, it kind of was like that, and I'll be honest. Alex didn't give us a whole lot of time because his attempt was on again, off again, on again, and
Yeah.
so really that whole project came together in about 45 days. Um,
Wow.
but again, because I'm sitting in the factory most of the time, we could execute it. There was a few things that I knew we didn't have enough time to do, which is why I contacted Josh at Silka, and I'm like, can you 3D print these for me, because I just don't have time to get
Yeah.
this made. Like, oh, I've never done that before, but sounds like a challenge, and we're always up to a challenge. And
Yeah.
so but between the help of Silka and then what we could do ourselves, yeah, we were able to pull that together in a pretty short period of time. And we've since had the bike in the wind tunnel several times, and there's nothing faster than that bike that we've tested up until now. And we benchmarked with pretty much the fastest world tour bikes out there.
And did you put that against other track bikes, or are you just saying just other bikes in general?
Uh, we are not able to test against other track bikes, but we can test their road bike equivalent, whether it be from Specialized or Cervelo or Argon 18, and I
Yeah.
can that it's quite a bit faster.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to put you on the spot and you don't have to answer this question. And if I need to edit it out, are we going to see a factor track bike? Yeah, I'm a track
Well,
guy.
well,
So,
actually, we have. That's part of the rules. Is in order to for Alex to compete in the hour record, the bike has to be commercialized within 1 year. And so what did he did the record just at the end of the year. So we have until next December to come out with a track bike. And it
There you guys go.
has to be that track bike that he raced. So yeah, it's definitely in the plan. We have a few federations that are talking to us about Paris 2024 and
Yeah.
supplying them with bikes.
Yeah, because like literally, well, here's the thing. I've had the luxury of riding for Team USA. I've had the opportunity of dealing with federations. I've had the opportunity to deal with teams and deal with bikes. I've never talked to a bike brand this openly, and like you just seem very open and receptive. And I've never heard of a bike brand being so open and receptive with other brands like Silka, et cetera, in creating bikes like that. And so is this going to be like your pursuit dominant bike and then you're going to look into creating a mass start style bike, or are you going to hope that it can kind of intertwine like both, like kind of like how the Argon does? I mean, they have the little topper and you can make it a pursuit bike, or I mean a mass start bike or an endurance bike, etc.
My impression, and I'm not a track expert, but in speaking to people who are, it's two pretty different athletes. The guys that are riding the endurance events versus the guys that are riding the sprint events, as far as the amount of power going into the bike. And I think that there's too much compromise having one bike that does it all. I kind of feel like to have a sprint bike and then you need to have an endurance bike. I don't think that one size fits all can really cover it. So I think, of course, we'll start with that endurance bike because we already have the groundwork there. But I think what we've done with the Hanzo can certainly lend itself to then, being an interesting design for a sprint specific bike.
No, that's awesome. That's super cool. And I didn't even know if I would get that out of you on the podcast, but look at that. Look what we can do. So yeah, diving into that, I guess my next thing is, you guys work with several teams. Obviously we've had several athletes on the podcast. Factor isn't just a bike brand. They also have Black Ink, or are those two separate brands? And do you like to keep those separate?
We like to keep them a little bit separate because I don't want to fall into that trap of Black Ink becoming the house brand of Factor. We hope that Black Ink can fit just as good on a Pinarello or a Cervelo as it can Factor. So we try to keep them a little bit separate in that regard. So we continue to develop product for Black Ink that actually doesn't end up only on a Factor. And so that's important for us to kind of continue in that direction.
Awesome. No, that's super cool. And so, yeah, so diving a little bit out of product, and you seem like a very intelligent guy, and like you've spent probably more time in the wind tunnel than you have in your own home. But I almost find it hard to believe because when I found you and like really, because I always knew who you were, but I saw a post. I followed you on Instagram. You rode 3,000 kilometers, 3,100 kilometers in the month of December. So you rode 100K a day. You said, you know what, Rafa, screw your Festive 500. I'm just going to have a festive month.
Yeah, I'll be honest. There was a couple of things that happened. Of course, I rode over 20,000 kilometers in 2020.
Okay.
And I gave myself the goal of only riding 15,000 kilometers in 2021. And it became pretty apparent that I was going to come up short by about, 1,000 kilometers. I wasn't going to come up super short, but I was going to come up short. And the other thing I realized was I just wasn't riding my bike as much as I wanted to. And so I decided, I spoke to my sales manager, who also rides a lot. He's a very competitive bike rider. His name is John Ebson. And I spoke to him. I said, we need to make a challenge for December of riding 100K a day. And he's like, that's pretty ridiculous. And I'm like, yeah, but I think we can manage it. And so, just kind of like started waking up at 5 a.m. and, knocking out 3.5 hour.
And you're still working full days. You're still.
Yeah, that was part of the rule. Was you still, I said, well, okay, we can be at work by 9:30. And so, we were still working full days. And our days are pretty long.
Yeah.
but no, it was great, because I got to tell you, on January 1st, I was still really happy to go ride my bike again. And so it really kind of, reignited that flame, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah.
And, riding, instead of reaching my goal of 15,000 kilometers, I actually rode 16,500 because of
Because of
that
that
month.
month. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well,
Yeah.
what's super cool about it is like, see, I'm not even, and I think this is kind of what Rafa tried to do. Like, I'm not even a factor athlete. And the thing I was like, man, I want to do that. I want to jump into that. So is this something that we're going to kind of see stick with factor?
I
Because it almost like I could see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like when this topic comes up in the coffee room, I could see you not promoting it in the off chance that you don't do it. Like, why would you promote it and not achieve it? But you did.
Yeah, I think that, I definitely, there was some times I was a little worried, especially in that first week. I'm like, this is gonna take its toll. But we were pretty lucky with the weather. I only had to ride in the rain twice. It
Okay.
is a little cold here in the wintertime, but we were pretty lucky with the weather. And of course, it's December. There's Christmas parties and things to go to.
Yeah.
So bank a few extra miles for those days when you just didn't want to go ride 100K. So very like in the first week, I did a 210K ride just so I knew, okay, I can miss a day sometime in here. And then I was riding maybe like 105, 110Ks a day, just trying to build up a little bit extra in the bank. But in the end, I ended up riding 3,200 kilometers for the month. So, I didn't need all that was in the bank. So it was good. But yeah, I can definitely see this becoming a thing.
Yeah.
Um, I
Because I
could
mean,
definitely,
with the amount of like endurance craziness that we have going on, and all respect and all shout out to the Rafa Festive 500. I think that started a very cool thing in the winter. But like we're bike packing across the country now. You have like Phil Guyman doing these crazy climbing rides. You have guys riding through the night, riding across the country. Like the challenges are just getting crazier and crazier. Do you think this is like something you guys are going to stick with?
oh, well, I don't know. I don't, a lot of people like to define cycling as suffering, and I don't really like to define it that way. I like to define cycling as just pure enjoyment. And
Yeah,
so I don't think that you necessarily need to create these events that require pure suffering, but I think you want to create events that challenge people, but that if they come up short, they come up short.
for
But I
sure.
think it needs to be, something within reason. Because it was funny, David Miller, good mate of mine, he put up a challenge: ride 200 kilometers in December. And I right away I called him up and pulled the piss out of him. I'm like, 200 kilometers.
Yeah. Yeah, in the month of
Like,
December. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
I that there's obviously different people out there looking for different challenges, but I don't want our sport to be, described as suffering, because I don't think that's what it is.
No, yeah, and you know, I necessarily don't disagree with that, but I do think the it's not necessarily suffering anymore. It's like how far can we push ourselves? Like
Yeah.
it's not really the suffer as much, and like that's where the Festive 500 I think kind of comes in. It's like doing 500 kilometers, especially for people that work and all these other things. Like that's a big feat and achievement. It's not much of a suffer. It's kind of like Leadville, right? Like you do Leadville, you know, you are suffering, whether you want to say you are or not, no matter how fast you're going or how good you are. Um,
What
but
don't I'm signed up for Unbound this year for the 200 miler. So
oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I did the 100 last year, and I will tell you right now, that was about as much as I would like to do. So, um, but yeah, I think the sport is always looking for a new challenge, and that's where the gravel has come into play. It's kind
yeah.
of why go do 100K road race or Grand Fondo when you can go ride 200 miles of pure Kansas chunky gravel and literally experience 10 different types of gravel. I mean, all the way from literally riding big rocks and marbles to riding just plain white dirt that you're doing 20 miles an hour over. And
Mhm.
so yeah, but anyways, so one more question for you. Cause I don't want to keep you all morning, and I wanted to get some of these things out, and it's really cool to kind of hear kind of the development of Factor and how it kind of went about, especially with you being in Taiwan. Um, but if you could have a cup of coffee with one individual, and it seems like exorbitant amount of people. Like you've already had coffee with people that I could only dream to have coffee with.
Yeah.
Um, but if you could have a cup of coffee with one individual, dead or alive, who would that
Uh-huh.
person be? And how would you take your coffee and why?
Well, yeah, I would say, I've already had coffee with Eddie Merckx,
Oh,
Greg
wow.
LeMond, and the whatnot. So yeah, I wouldn't say, and I think my answer is going to be somewhat surprising, but I'd actually would want to have coffee with Simon Matra, the
Okay.
founder of Rafa.
Oh,
Um, and the reason why is because I really feel like if there's one person who has changed our sport for the better in the last 15 years, I can't think of anyone more than him. And I don't really own much Rafa stuff, and I'm not such a huge fan of the brand, but what they've accomplished to me is amazing. And if I can do something similar with Factor, I'd be over the moon. Coffee wise, that's a black drip coffee with a little bit of milk.
awesome. Awesome. So you would more or less want to sit down with the owner of Rafa just to kind of discuss like the diversity, because I think like I said, I've been doing my research and I was doing a little bit of searching, and some of the teams you support, I mean, even Israel Startup Nation and the women's team that you support, the whole reason why you're supporting these teams is not necessarily because they're in the world tour. I mean, even Israel Startup Nation, they weren't that great when you started working with them from the gun. Like you
Yeah.
probably could have worked with several other teams, but it's the diversity aspect.
I think diversity is really important. We actually sponsor two women's teams, and we think that that's really important. We're actually going to be working with an African gravel team in 2022, which is
What?
also super exciting. Yeah,
That's so cool.
we're helping to get that started up. That's something that Ian Boswell sort of put in place. But yeah, I think that it's not just about I think equality is really important. But what I see that Rafa has done is obviously they've done all the right things around equality, but they've also changed. When I started riding bikes, we were all wearing racing kit, and that was what you wore, and it was all about racing and suffering and all that, and that comes back to the suffering again. Now they've turned it into there's millions of people that are just not all that interested in racing. They just want to go ride their bike for enjoyment. And I think that that's wonderful because it's opened our sport up to so many more people. And they've really created this welcoming atmosphere, even though it's a bit of a clique at the Rafa side, but they've created this very, this atmosphere of it's not about yelling at some guy because he doesn't ride in the pace line correctly, and it's not about going out and just trying to drop everybody. It's really about taking photos and really enjoying it. And I make fun of it sometimes because there's days that I want to go train, but there's days that I just want to go hang out and drink coffee, and they've done both.
For sure, and I do think Factor has touched a bit of that for sure. Even
Mhm.
before I knew nothing about the African team, but I mean, you have a retired pro with a cookie bike. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's when you when you kind of have a little bit of that, like you are starting to open up into the fun side of things. And you know what? It's gonna kind of tickle one last question for me then on that front, because I just remembered that when I was looking through the video and I was doing some of my research, you said that there's a bit of a hole at Factor in bike creation. Like you wish you could create a mountain bike, and like there's some other things that you guys still wish to do. And so if there's one bike that you guys think that you're missing at Factor, so you can only choose one, which one do you think you're missing?
That kind of puts me on the spot.
I know, and I've been trying to put you on the spot this whole time, and you've been really good at it. And so
I
now,
my goal for Factor is I want to be I would say the number one premium bicycle brand.
mhm,
And to be the number one premium bicycle brand, you can't just sell high end road and high end gravel.
yeah,
And so there is obviously a plan in the not too distant future to have additional um, uh, bike models that represent what is a premium bike, I would say.
that's awesome. No, that's a good that right there is a politician's answer, and I will take it. I will
Yeah.
take it. I will take it and run with it. Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you want to go check out Rob's Instagram, I'm going to put a link in the description below. Make sure you go check out his crazy ass ride that he did. Also, I'll put a link in the description below for Factor. You guys can check out all of Factor's bikes. I mean, they have list upon list upon list. I mean, they have multiple different road bikes, aero bikes, you know. I mean, I literally just watched a video on how he goes, this is the UCI weight limit. Let's create the lightest road bike we can create and let's see what we can get him out with. So please go check that out. Other than that, we'll see you next time. Cheers.